Question for all the leaders out there. If your leadership style were a playlist, would it be stuck on repeat, or are you ready to hit shuffle and unlock some brand new tracks? Today on the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast, we're sitting down with Margaret Moore, one of the co-authors of The Science of Leadership, 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. It's a book that took 50 years of research and makes it all actually useful and human, and dare we say, fun. We're talking about everything from quieting your ego to flexing your mindset and how to not accidentally overuse your best leadership strength like a broken karaoke machine. Buckle up. The Blanchard LeaderChat podcast starts right now. Margaret Moore, welcome to the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast. How are you doing today?
Chad, I'm fabulous. It's a spring day here, a little bit of rain, and there's something about spring that always starts a sense of growth.
We're here to talk about your book, The Science of Leadership, 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. You co-authored this with Jeffrey Hull. What led you down this path to tackle this topic? Why now?
So I started in the coaching field in 2000 and quickly realized that there was no science behind coaching competencies. And even to this day, there's not much. And so I spent a decade working with collaborators to do that. And alongside of that, so that's more coaching for well-being, for leadership. And as I've coached leaders and worked with leaders and trained leaders over the years, I've just realized how invisible the work of thousands of researchers is to everybody. It's almost like we've missed the boat in terms of understanding the fundamentals. Like you go to chemistry class and you learn how the periodic table works and the elements of the periodic table. And you get to leadership. And I went to MBA school, when in the 80s, when Competitive Strategy, Michael Porter's book, was the leadership book, right? That's all we had. And all of the research has emerged since then. So I was just darn curious about, if you looked at the totality of it, what would you find? What would the wisdom of the whole be? And so I think it was about time that there was kind of a tour of all of it in a way that you could understand and apply. But also, the timing turns out to be great. I didn't realize this until we dove in, but in the last few years, there have been many, in scientific terms, people do studies. And then the science gets more robust when people analyze many studies, systematic reviews, meta-analyses. And right now, there are reviews of, each one of 100 studies, 200 studies, 250 studies, many reviews of many leadership phenomenon that have just come out. And that then give you kind of more conclusive findings. And so now is a really good time. The leadership research started really 50 years ago, and today it's matured. There's lots of criticism of it, but as a whole, there's way more to learn from it than there ever was.
You distilled the research you did into 9 capacities. We're going to get into each of them, I imagine, through our conversation, but how would you recommend that leaders identify which of the 9 capacities for them to develop first, especially, as a leader, they all seem so important often.
Yeah, in fact, we have a exercise in the introduction to address this. So the 9 are listed before we even really talk much about them, but there's sort of a common sense around each one. I mean, in many ways, you sort of already knew this. You understood what they are, but maybe you didn't understand where they came from and what they meant. So we started off by having people, in a self-coaching exercise, just rate themselves on what they're best at, like, rate from 1 is my best and 9 is my worst. And then look at my current circumstances and say, what is most necessary of these 9 right now? Do I need to be more transformational? Do I need to be more purposeful? Do I need to be more agile, flexible side? And then look at those two lists, and wherever your your score is high, like a 1, 2, and 3 on something that you need to do, but that's not a strength. That's an opportunity to fill a gap. And then from there, then how do you decide which ones to work on? And we know from the behavior change literature that the two forces that determine whether people move forward to change and whether they keep moving forward is whether they have high quality motivation. They've got really good, authentic reasons for doing it. It's meaningful. It's something that the outcome of which they want badly. And they believe they can. They have confidence. And so you can score those two things on a score of 0 to 10 and figure out where you've got the highest scores. Like if you're not at like at least a 7 and a 7 on motivation and confidence, then set it aside. So that's kind of you as a coach, you probably know all about this. It's just a way of getting people to think about what am I good at? What do I need to get better at? But what am I really ready to change?
Well, a lot of leaders that we speak with, they really value authenticity, they value compassion. What did the science show, or what did the science add that they might be missing about those two areas?
Yeah, well, authenticity is a pretty big abstract word. And when you get to there's a really great review in the last few years compared authentic leadership to transformational leadership, in fact. What you found is that authenticity had to do with you as the leader authentically sharing your purpose, what you care about. Like why is this job meaningful for you? What is important about it? What's its contribution? And then the second part of authenticity is that you equally, because there's a balance, you need to take care of yourself, but equally care about what other people value, your followers, your organization, your teams. And in terms of outcomes, you being authentic and sharing what you care about, which creates more authentic relationships because you're being yourself, helps you as a leader. People say, oh, look at you, you're authentic. But what improves their performance and organizational performance is that you care about their values and what their purpose is and what they want. And so being authentic for yourself is actually not going to get the outcomes. The outcomes is that you authentically care about what everybody else wants. And I think authenticity isn't always seen in such a simple way, that really what you're doing is you're being authentic so that people trust you, you've got good relationships, but what they really care about is that you understand what they value.
Let's talk real world examples. You've got a lot of those. What's an example where a small improvement in one leadership capacity significantly shifted, whether it be a team or an organization's
So
performance?
across all of them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I'll start with conscious because it's a good place for everybody to start. And there's this beautiful new concept that's not well studied in leadership yet called a quiet ego. So the quiet ego, kind of like what I just talked about in authenticity, is one that is really balancing, your own self-promotion and progress with others. Okay. So quiet ego has got this nice balance. Well, you know what a noisy ego feels like, right? You're annoyed, you're irritated. I mean, everybody has a lot of it every day, right? Do you know anybody, any leader? I mean, reactivity is one of the things that comes up all the time with folks because we have emotions and we want to express them. So that's ego noise. And owning it and realizing it that it's actually getting in your way. You can't see clearly when you're snappy and irritated. And then you don't have trust, and then you don't have influence, and then downstream. So our story in the book is about an HR leader from Brazil who had grown up with a fairly a father who was demanding and critical and snappy, and he carried on those skills. And didn't even really realize what the impact was when he became a senior leader. People started in the 360s to say, look, this guy is, I don't like this behavior. And he really didn't even understand that this was getting in his way. And so being able to quiet the ego noise and ultimately transcend it, and not be snappy, had huge downstream effects. Just by thinking about his snappiness and what its consequences were, and then regulating it, and then ultimately transcending it. So I think that it goes beyond emotional intelligence, because the science of integration, which means, I'm snappy, but I've now outgrown the snappiness, is ultimately the destination here. So I think that one still seems universal. You just look around at the world. There's just a lot of snappiness going on, right?
Yeah.
It's almost culturally okay to be irritated and angry and righteous and all of that. So I think the idea of the quiet ego and the noisy ego is a very important one.
Ken's always said just the idea of servant leadership is really a big part of his legacy. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit. How can leaders ensure that they're balancing, as you said, like in the underuse and overuse of the capacity of servant leadership,
Yeah.
especially in high pressure environments?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say that servant leadership has, I think, two forms, and the form that Greenleaf started with is out of reach, certainly for me. I think for most people, maybe Ken was a true servant, which is that you truly put other people first all the time, right? That you live for that. You are really a servant. And I think that, in fact, there's some discussion of this in the literature. The more practical way of being a servant leader is to balance serving the greater good with also serving yourself. And so I just want to make that point, because I think it feels like way too hard to be completely in service, and that there's this middle ground. So the first thing to know is that humility is considered part of servant leadership. It's one of the main components. And like authenticity, it turns out that being humble as a leader doesn't impact your own performance. So you can be arrogant and it won't change how well you do. But when you're humble, which means, and these are not actually Mother Teresa kinds of things, like basically you've got an objective view of yourself, you show appreciation to others' contributions, and you're teachable. You're open to feedback. That's what humility is. It's not some great spiritual, guru kind of thing. It's pretty down to earth. Well, when you are those things, others' performance improves. So basically, you're not taking all the oxygen out of the room, you're leaving space for them to contribute. And except in high stakes situations where followers prefer leaders who are more directive and less humble. So it is situational, which is very important. The
Right.
context matters. So I think just starting there, just being practically humble and caring about others' well-being and their needs and caring about the greater good. It's not much more complicated than that. Has this huge impact on other people's performance.
You reference action research, which may be kind of
Yeah.
a new term for some of our listeners. It certainly was for me. You talk about it as a way to improve your leadership. So can you elaborate on how a leader can practically implement that in their daily routine?
Yeah. So this is a great point. So there are lots of limitations with even the totality of the research because of context specificity, right? Even in your own day, you may need to be agile in one conversation, conscious in another, servant in another, transformational another. Really, each situation could call for something different. So that means on the front line, you are your own researcher. You are creating a hypothesis. You're saying, if I lean in and listen a little more in this way today, like I restate what somebody says and embellish it, or I say something about, their emotional state in a way that's kind, or I challenge their thinking. This is an experiment. I don't actually know whether it's going to work. Let me try it out. And I don't get too attached to it. Then you experiment, you do it, you see what happens, and you learn. And that's action research. Action research is just being, and we do this, Chad, without even describing it as that. We're always trying new things, right? And I think the in coaching, we like this approach of experimenting, and rather than I'm going to get this goal. Remember Latham and Locke, big, hairy, audacious goals. We're going to go for this. Well, it turns out that when goals are hard, that's a recipe for rapid failure. Because if you attach your esteem and your reputation to a big goal and then you don't achieve it, it's not a good outcome. If you say, I'm experimenting, let me try this, let me see whether this works, and even tell others, that I'm doing something new. It's an experiment. I'd love to know what you think. That takes the pressure off. It actually really reflects what's actually happening, which is we are often experimenting, right? We make a presentation one way one day, we change it. So that's action research. It's what we're already doing. It just gives it an elevated kind of sense of value and importance, and it makes it, makes people smile, like, okay, yeah, we're all doing research every day in every moment.
I love when you dig in and you start to challenge some of your previous assumptions. So what was there? What was the biggest
Yeah.
surprise for you in your research?
Oh, that's such a good one. Well, it's a new study that I'm writing an article for HBR, and a new study came out after we finished the book, and I know you don't mind talking about stuff that's not in the book,
Hmm.
about 50 years of research on gender and leadership. Have you seen it? It's in Leadership
No, I
Quarterly.
have not.
So, um, so of the 9 behaviors that were measured across all these studies, that are known to be effective, and the 4 parts of transformational leadership, they're ethical leadership, just the basic stuff. Women scored more highly on all of them, including the ones related to transformational leadership. I mean, I'm a woman, and I still think of women as being good at the relational, the compassion, the listening, the coaching. But it turns out that women score better on the intellectual stimulation, on the role modeling, on the inspiration, and that where men score most highly. This is obviously across all of the literature, right? Where men score most highly is in laissez-faire passive leadership, which is not known to be effective. That surprised me, Chad. I don't know if it surprises you. Um, because I don't think even most women realize. I mean, one of the great things about writing this book is that I've shared it with some leaders who I think are great at many of these capacities, if not most. And what I wanted them to take away is a sense of being nourished, that what they're doing is actually based on research. And that has happened. And I think a lot of women knowing that will feel, okay, yeah, I have worked harder. I am doing things that matter. So I was moved by that, Chad.
I love the idea of assume constraints. It's something that I learned really early on here at Blanchard, and it opens your eyes that you may be coming in with some things. And it sounds like that study opened your eyes as well. So I need to dig
Yeah,
into that. Thank
exactly.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
that's really the power of science, right? Is to get you to think about something with a bit more depth and breadth than you've been doing,
yeah.
which makes you a reflective, right? Self-reflection, isn't that like, step one in leadership is
Well,
step back and reflect on yourself. And that's what the science does, is helps us be more reflective.
one of my favorite, sayings by Ken, and I always butcher his quote, so I try not to say one of my favorite quotes, but one of his sayings is, if you stop learning, just start throwing dirt on him because he's ready to go because
Uh,
you got to keep on
yeah,
learning and keep on having an open mind. So, all right, time for a
yeah,
couple more questions. So,
right.
as you kind of think through your research, what are some of the more common obstacles that leaders face when trying to integrate all of these capacities simultaneously, and how do you recommend they overcome that?
Yeah, so one thing I start with, which is not really fully fleshed out in the book, is that a long time ago, I developed through unpacking my inner world and voices a sort of universal personality structure. It's in one of my earlier books, but it is the basis for this structure, and I've mapped the nine to all the main personality models. And I don't know if you've ever used Enneagram, but it got a big scientific boost in last November, because Dan Siegel, who is a tremendous scholar in the mind, the study of the mind, published a work, 20 years of work providing a scientific foundation of Enneagram, which is a multiplicity of mind model. And so what I start with in my own coaching and where I can is to say, look, we have all of these capacities. We just, have more stronger in some and less than others, but they're all there. And if Carl Jung was still alive, he would say that the journey of growing as a human and as a leader is to branch out and develop the ones that have been underused, often inadvertently. Like I wasn't an intuitive, I didn't think of myself as a creative or an intuitive when I was in my biotech career. I was a CEO type, executive, extroverted thinker, planning. I mean, I don't even look the same now compared to when I did that. And so coaching brought out my intuitive side that I really did not know I had, and I would never have considered myself a creative. And now it's probably, I probably, it's my most favorite thing to do. So what I really try to help people realize is you have all of it. It's just it's just you haven't used it, or you haven't ever used it, or you used it a long time ago. So it might feel unfamiliar for a while, but it might feel awkward, just like, some areas feel more awkward, but you will get to a basic use of it. You just have to, take it slow and step by step. So my main message is that there is a wholeness. It's in the literature. That's what comes across. There is a wholeness. And the wholeness is is an inspiration to all of us to branch out. And in that way, learning, is about that, right? We're branching out, we're opening new horizons, we're using different parts of ourselves, and that, there's no such thing really then as finding yourself, really. It's more about expanding yourself. And I think that's my main message, is just to get people curious about being whole, and that wholeness is a real phenomenon. It feels awfully good the more whole you get. And the more whole you get, the more impactful you are. So that's that's how I try to get people into this expansion.
If a leader could only ask themselves one question every morning to stay aligned with these nine capacities, which
Yeah,
could be?
yeah. What would they be? I mean, it's the self-reflection and pause. I sit for an hour in the morning going through the challenges of the day, decisions I need to make, things I need to do, groups I need to lead. And actually, it's just that simple idea of setting an intention. Who do I need to be today? What do I need to do more of? That's going to make a difference. And that intention of being more agile, more empathetic, more transformational, whatever it is, that then rides with you. And so, yeah, it's really about pausing and pausing throughout the day. What I have, one of my one of my close coaching colleagues, I don't know if you know Eric Kaufman in San Diego, but he's a real Buddhist. And he has the line, what am I being intended for? That's service, right? What is my role today? And whether you're religious or spiritual, there is a way you can play impactful role in your life in every moment. And I think if you pause and let your intuition tell you that, you can't overthink it. You really just have to say, I think this is what I need more of. And that settle, it provides a bit of peace of mind in the morning, as opposed to this, sense of being overwhelmed with too much to do and too many things on my plate.
Of all the leaders that you've coached or you've studied, what do you think differentiates those who just learn these capacities from those who truly live them?
Yeah. So live them as opposed to lead with them.
You can go in both directions.
Well, I'm going to go with the leading, because I do think it's the highest expression of human strengths. That's why leadership's a beautiful thing, because there's the leading of yourself first, which we all have to do. Nobody gets off the hook on that one. And then there's others, which most of us, all of us have. We have relationships, whether it's at work or not. But the real deal, the real complexity comes in at the systems level. So you can be conscious, agile, authentic, relational, transformational, etc. But it doesn't do any good if the system isn't, right? If it doesn't travel outwards. And so this whole idea of sharing leadership, which I think is really the ultimate expression of achievers, because achieving through spreading and disseminating, what I call the why, what, and how. The why being purpose, vision, meaning; the what being strategy, decision making, goals, etc. And then the how is, how you do it. Actually, having that travel outwards and creating a system, a complex system where these things become part of the way we do things around here. I think that's where, that's the most interesting, because it's not a straight line. From a strategy point of view, it takes a longer term perspective. So I think it's like bringing all this out to other people that's really the interesting challenge, worthy of the, best and brightest leaders.
If there's one thing that our listeners can take away from our conversation, Margaret, what would it be?
Well, my favorite, I think the most important thing in our world right now is transformational leadership. In the science, it's really about helping followers transform themselves so that the organization and what it does transforms the world. I do think that is our calling as leaders. There's just really no time for turning handles. There's only time for moving mountains. And the value of all these capacities together, which is beyond the science, is that they all add up to you being able to be a transformational agent. That is my purpose. I've been working on the transformation in healthcare from the standpoint of bringing coaching into it as a mainstream activity. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm not done, but it is the most satisfying thing I've done in my life, in my work life, is to set out with a vision and then through many, many avenues and teams and starting 3 organizations, have it begin to come to fruition. So I think that's the hardest capacity, but boy, the more of us that really do it well, it's like everybody rowing together, right? We will change this world. We will save the planet. We will improve the livelihood of all of us. And so that's why we wrote the book. It was going to be called Transformational Leadership. But our folks who completed our survey said they wanted the science of leadership. And so that's what we did. And we did do it. We did answer the call, but it's the thoughtful approach to transforming others and systems that's really, that's what we need.
The book is called The Science of Leadership: 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. Margaret, if people wanted to dig a little bit deeper into you, learn a little bit more about all the things that you're doing, where would you send them?
So first, there's 2 of us. I haven't been talking about Jeff because we've been talking about the science, which was the piece that I did. But you can go to jeffreyhull.com or coachmeg.com. And our book website is thescienceofleadership.com. Sorry, scienceofleadership.com, not the.
Love it. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Thanks for take a little bit of time out of your day and spend some time with myself and our listeners here at the Blanchard LeaderChat podcast.
Thank you, Chad. It's great to be with you.
Join us for today's podcast. If you enjoyed the interview, go ahead and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and please share it with your friends. The best way you can help us grow is feedback. So write a review if you haven't already. This podcast is brought to you by Blanchard, the heart of human achievement. Visit Blanchard.com for additional resources to help you and your organization succeed.